Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Crossroads of Caring Lunch and Learn for September. This morning, our topic is about using music in spiritual care, and our presenter is Pamela Goddard. Pamela is a Buddhist by spiritual orientation, and she is a harpist. I don't know, by trade or by hobby. I don't know how it came about. Maybe you can tell us that. And she uses her music in her work as a spiritual caregiver in several hospitals. So, Pam, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right.
Thanks for being.
Um, yeah, thank you for inviting me, Marianne, and it's nice to see everyone that can be here. Hello to people who will be listening later. Um, yeah, as Marianne said, I am um, a Buddhist by practice and ordination. So I thought I would give you a very quick outline and sort of path of how I got here. Um, And just wanted to say as I was reflecting on this before the presentation today, realizing that for me, music is part of spiritual care, but it's also part of my spiritual practice. Um, and so it's all a piece of the fabric of what I do. Um, it's hard for me to tease out when I'm doing one and when I'm doing another. They interweave in many ways, although chaplaincy and this can be distinct also. We'll get there. So a very quick overview of my path. I became a Zen Buddhist in my adult years, started practicing with a Sangha, as we call a community of practice in the Buddhist tradition. Um, in the early 1990s, and particularly in the tradition of Plum Village with Thich Nhat Hanh as our teacher. And that's a very engaged form of Buddhism, and sometimes called a sort of the Unitarians of the Buddhist world. Uh, there's bits of different traditions. We don't keep to any just one sutra or particular form of practice. All things come together, which has helped me very much in my chaplaincy because I already come with that inclusive awareness, inclusive heart yearning to include different perspectives. Through that engaged practice, I wanted to serve people, help people, and one of those ways was volunteering at our local hospice center here in Ithaca, with a group that sang at the bedside, sang for residents and families in different ways. And the person who led that was a certified therapeutic harpist and music thanatologist, thanatology being the practice particularly for those at the end of life. And I was very inspired by what she did and thought, I'd like to learn more about this. Seems to be a theme that comes through my life. And so I learned about the International Harp Therapy Program and began to learn to play the harp as a way of doing that. I was already a singer, already musical in many ways, but had not played the harp until about 10 years ago. So so I'm going to back up just a little bit because it's very common for people to confuse therapeutic music with music therapy. And they're different in subtle and distinct ways. And one of the ways I often compare it in a way that people seem to understand is the difference between a massage therapist and a physical therapist. A massage therapist is bringing comfort, they're bringing ease, they have an awareness of anatomy, but they do not have the same rigorous training that a physical therapist would have in working for specific outcomes, working for a plan of care. A massage therapist is more hands-on in that moment. And a therapeutic musician is much the same. hands-on in the present, in that moment, offering support, offering comfort, offering care, but not planning a musical course of therapy that a music therapist would do. So our work is similar but different. So music as comfort, as care, is something that really anyone can do. Mothers do this with their children. Families do this naturally with family members at the bedside, if that's particularly part of their family tradition, to sing familiar comforting songs or familiar hymns. It's something we know how to do integrally for most of us, whether it's simply humming for somebody, playing their favorite music on a streamcast can be that kind of thing as well. So in some ways, it's a natural human thing to bring music as comfort. And it can be a rigorous training or in-depth training. And my certification program as a therapeutic musician was about a 2-year program with a rather sizable textbook and other source material. I have to admit, I had not opened up in a while. It was really good to look at it and say, so what did I study back then? And much of what we study is, well, it's a range, the history of how music has been used as a therapeutic practice, how it's being used currently. We learn about acoustics, we learn about different musical systems, because this is an international therapy program. We want to have not just Western music, but music from other places as well, and have the ability to play or have the ability for the program to address those music, to include those musics. We learn about self-care. Some of this will sound very familiar. There are people who have been through CPE programs. We learn about being present with others. We learn about appropriately responding in the moment to what's needed. And when I was taking CPE, I learned a lot about joining and how to be with someone, what's needed in the moment. It felt very familiar. The phrase that's used in this training, the therapeutic harp training, is what is willing to meet me as I walk in, so that I am meeting and responding to that particular situation. Part of the training was site work, clinical site work, because the intent for this is to have musicians, particularly harp therapists, therapeutic harpists, in medical settings. So we learn about medical systems to some extent, learn about what you might encounter in, ICU or telemed or the NICU or pediatrics, and how this will be useful for different people in different settings. It's just looking at the list of harp therapy in different settings, and I'll just sort of skim through because it's a list of about 20 different options, from agitation, Alzheimer's, patients with cancer, patients who are non-responsive or in a coma, disaster relief, hypnotherapy. I've not done any of that. Working with people with migraines or multiple sclerosis, neonatal Parkinson's, psychological patients, rehabilitation, stroke, etc. And each of these things is really just touching on it. And if someone wanted to go in more depth, they would do more study. I did my clinical site work at Cayuga Medical, working with Tim Dean, which was wonderful, and quickly learned that music can create a container for ease and relaxation. Probably the most common thing that I hear as I'm playing, walking through the halls or through the units or at bedside is, "Oh, that's so soothing." And in many ways, that's the most important thing that I do is bring comfort and soothing. And that's true for patients, for family members, and for staff. Um, it creates a container for an exhale, for ease in the moment. And at the bedside, it may create a container for the release of emotions. Um, People may start crying. They may start remembering things that they want to share, and it would open up a lot of conversations. And I realized in my path in doing this service that I wanted to know more about how to support the conversational side as well as the musical side. And that's what brought me into contemplative care and chaplaincy. First, a 9-month program through the New York Zen Center for Contemplative Care in New York City, and then the Crossroads of Caring, CPE. Around the time that I was doing this, I'll say I visit hospitals. I also visit people in skilled nursing facilities here in Ithaca and also down in Elmira. When I go down there on Mondays, I visit people at the skilled nursing facility at St. Joseph's and then go over to Arnett in the afternoon. And in some ways, those are different. I'll try and touch on that. What I do in the hospital and what I do in nursing facilities, somewhat different. I imagine questions may be coming up. Store them up because I will really appreciate them in a little bit. But I would pull into one facility, and very often there was a car there with a bumper sticker that said, "When words fail, music speaks." And that's really part of what I do. Sometimes there simply aren't words to connect with what someone is feeling. They may not even have words to express what they're feeling and experiencing. So just offering music can really be a support, and it can be a gateway. So I was realizing as well when I was thinking about this, in some ways, what I will be presenting, suggesting to you is what Zen in the art of music as spiritual care, or spiritual care as music, spiritual path as music, because it's often this and that. You know, anybody can do this, and it helps to have some training. When words fail, music speaks, and when music opens up a container, words may come out, words may manifest. So it's been a real wonderful thing for me to have a way to bring these two things together. So it's really in balance. And it's constantly a matter of paying attention, which is, most of what I say will not be a surprise because it's really what we do as chaplains. It's being present, paying attention, and listening, and then offering what might be most helpful. And being ready to adjust as needed. If this is not what's most helpful, how can I shift what I'm doing somewhat? So I wrote down a lot of words, just like simple words: listening and meeting, holding space, creating a container for both physical healing and emotional, spiritual healing. One of the things that music can do really well is relax the nervous system. It can be a resource for ease. And when our nervous systems can relax, then we can let go of tension. um, there's space for the healing to happen. So what we're trained to do as therapeutic musicians is really that listening and then offering and then adjusting. And I do that with the harp, with notes, with what specific notes I'm playing, with the intensity of the note. Am I playing loudly? Am I playing softly? As to the need for the person. Somebody who's in a lot of pain may, their nerves may be on edge, and something too loud, too fast would only intensify that. So we'd tone it down. And was realizing that there's, again, while reflecting on this for today, a lot of words that we use for music are also used for relationship, such as harmony. Are we in harmony with each other? Are we in resonance with each other? Are we responding well? Is that resonance pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? Which is a Buddhist practice, just to reflect. Is this what I'm experiencing supportive, creating more tension, therefore not supportive, or just sort of neutral? And what is our intention as we bring in to amplify what is helpful, to diminish what is not helpful, and finding a rhythm and balance between the person who's presenting the music and the person who's receiving. So given that, sometimes people ask, are there specific things you're going to play? Do you have a playlist? Or should you play this for that? And the answer is yes and no. Not really, because it's a matter of noticing what's needed. That said, I do have some things that I'm more likely to play for different situations. Someone may need things that are more like lullabies. Somebody may need something that's a little bit more uplifting. So am I going to be playing in a major key or a minor key? These things, those are the most specific modes of music that people are familiar with. Major tends to lift us up and be joyful. Minor tends to be a little darker or somber or sad. Not everybody responds to those things in the same way, but just sort of being aware of what's the intention, what's needed. So when I'm walking through the units at either Cayuga Medical or Arnett, I'm noticing where people are, whether someone, if the doors are open, whether they're sleeping, whether they're engaging in conversation with family members, whether they are seem to be agitated or in pain. I'm not always going directly into a room. Excuse me for a moment. Sometimes I'll have a recommendation from a nurse or from a colleague that the person in room 14 would really benefit from a music visit. More often, I'm walking through the hallways and someone will catch my eye or wave me in. And I may know nothing about what their situation is other than what I'm observing in the moment, and responding as best I can. If I can engage in conversation, then I might be able to get a sense of what is music that's most familiar and most welcome for them in that moment, and try to meet that as best I can, try to join them. Sometimes in relation to joining, I may walk in and someone is moaning or groaning. And this is another way that any of us can join in with them vocally, musically, is to, if they're groaning, match pitch if you're able to. Um, just, and it may just be a back with them, or, is it a declining or is it a rising and those will, I've found just that bit of matching somebody vocally in pitch and rhythm and volume can do a lot to join with someone and help them feel heard and met. It doesn't actually even have to be full music. And then from that, something else might come. So sighing, moaning, groaning, laughing with them is a musical way, although we may not think of it exactly as music. So let's see. If one was wanting to bring music in, um, for some people, hymns, common hymns will be helpful, particularly people of a certain age. I will almost say women of a certain age, but men also, more often women. It's my experience. Um, Sometimes it's not what they want to hear. So knowing their background can be helpful. Um, but more often, I was going to say calming, but steady music in that's unfamiliar actually is more often helpful than something familiar, because a familiar tune may trigger memories that are pleasant and happy, or they may trigger memories that are really sad, that may trigger grief in a way that's not helpful at the time. So I find that unfamiliar or improvised music is more often helpful than something familiar. The exception to that, or the flip side, is when I'm playing for people in skilled nursing, people with Alzheimer's or dementia. And in that case, familiar music can be really helpful. It's the most helpful thing, because those are things that people will sing along with. There's a lot of really wonderful science that's being done now on music and the brain. And one of the things that's wonderful and amazing about music is that it's not just one part of the brain that responds to music. It's all parts of the brain in different ways. Um, and so this can be very healing and helpful, and can help people restore memories for those who've lost them. People may speak again. They will sing along where they may not have spoken in a long time. And that can help them engage their brain. I will highly recommend this new book. I thought I heard There Was a Secret Chord by Daniel Levitin. It's just come out. It's really good. It's some of the most up-to-date information on music as medicine, music in the brain. And he goes into, I have not read the entire thing, but also goes into, some areas like music with relating, treating people with pain, treating or working with people with dementia and Alzheimer's or different neurological conditions. It's really good, and it's very readable. So this is a really wonderful book. one of the limits for me for Zoom is that it's actually really hard to do music well on Zoom, even with some of the enhancements that they have done with things to just limit distortion and that sort of thing. So I'm not going to try and present any music for you. I could sing something, which, sometimes I will use the harp, sometimes not. Most often those things together. I will say that, harp is one of the more common instruments for therapeutic music, but other instruments such as the guitar, such as wooden flutes, a few other instruments, violin, can also be used. The trick is to use them in a therapeutic way, because some instruments it's really easy to overplay for the situation. So you probably would not take a cornet into or an accordion. Although I know people who can play either one of those softly and therapeutically, but it's
How about a
unusual.
piccolo?
A piccolo, well, yeah. Well, I was thinking, wooden flute versus silver flute or piccolo, because it can be quite shrill. And since the sound doesn't just stay in one place, it's one of the wonders of music as well, is that sound will resonate out in all directions. So I've often find I think I'm playing for one person in one room. This happened just last week where it was somebody actually I knew who very much loves music. And I was playing outside of his door because they were getting him ready for discharge and he had contagion concerns. So I couldn't be inside the room with him. So I was standing outside playing for him. And somebody from the room next door was hearing it and came and stood outside in the hallway and was really taking it in. And I realized quickly, I'm not playing for the person I thought I was playing for. I'm playing for both of them and everybody else in that soundscape. So being aware of how this may be impacting other people as best possible, it really takes your awareness and you have to expand out as best one can, not knowing exactly where this may be going, but what I do as part of my spiritual care and spiritual practice in music is to consciously send out an intention for comfort, for soothing, for whoever may be hearing this, and hope for the best. I've been talking for quite a while. I think this is a good time to open up for any questions that people have or reflections that you may have. Some of you may be doing some of these things in your own practice already, and I'd love to hear about that.
Pam, I do have a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned violin. I'm wondering if lower registered instruments are better than like a viola or a cello, and cellos are cumbersome, I know. But
Yeah,
have you
cellos are
noticed?
cumbersome, although I do know I have a couple of friends who play cello, and they've devised some new strap. So you can play cello standing up and walking around, which is
Yeah.
pretty darn cool. I would say that depends on the hearing ability
Okay.
of the person you're playing for. Generally, I respond better to lower register things. And it's something that you can experiment with yourself, where you actually feel in your body different pitches. Lower register, I'm touching my chest and you can't see, but touching my belly as well. I tend to feel it in my core. Higher register may be more in my neck and head or in my arms. And so there may be different times when feels better than the other. But there are some people who don't hear those lower registers as well. And the higher register can be, it cuts through some of the other noises that may be going on. I should talk a little bit about when I'm walking through a unit, there's often other noises than human noises. There may be conversation, but there's machines that are making pitches. I will say that at Arnett, there's one unit where they tend to have their alarm, or it's not exactly an alarm, but it's like something to let someone know at the desk there's somebody that needs some help. And it's going like, it's not that, it's even worse. It's like between E and or G and B in the pitches, oscillating, and it never stops. If I was a patient there, it would drive me up a wall. It would make me insane. I'm surprised that it doesn't really disturb the staff to have that going all the time. So when I'm there, I'm trying to work around those pitches to soften the edges of that, so that it's not such a jarring soundscape for people to be in. So I certainly don't want to be working off notes that are going to be right up against them, causing dissonance. As I said, we want harmony, or I want harmony, not dissonance. So musically finding that space as well is really helpful and necessary, I think. So in terms of the pitches of the instruments, violin or cello can work. Depends on how it's played. I would personally probably tend to, in the woodwinds, more towards the lower flutes than a piccolo, because you're sort of limited in something that has just a really small range. So one of the benefits also of something like a harp, guitar can have a larger range as well. Then you can choose from the range that you want. So a viola might be better than a violin. I don't play either, so I'm not really sure, but it experiment. Yeah, thank you for the question. Other questions or observations? Yeah, Debbie.
Pamela, I'm just in awe of what you do. I'm so impressed by how attuned you are to the whole environment, the patient, obviously, but this whole environment in which there are other sounds, and how do you harmonize with them? And I was particularly struck by your matching of groans or moans or other noises. I had no idea that that was something that you tuned into. So thank you for, and because I never hear you play our paths don't cross in the hospital.
Right.
Especially nice to know about that. And gives me a sense that I can pass this along to a patient if that need arises. I was thinking a bit about vibration and how actually the internal organs are affected. I mean, I know how sensitive I am to, say, a car going by with that low bass throbbing, and how it just jars me. And so I would think that someone who is ill would have a very keen sense of, maybe not be able to articulate it, but just would feel it very and be affected by it.
Yeah. Yes, and it's one of the things I try to remain aware of as sending out the intention of comfort and care and healing, hope, whatever, is that what I'm sending out is going to be received, whether I plan it or not, because And it's one of the things we learn about in acoustics and musical vibrations, that the sound waves will go out in all directions, and our bodies, since they're primarily water, are going to be feeling that. And this is true for somebody who is hearing impaired, or somebody who's in a coma, non-responsive. There may not be any physical way, they may or may not. Sometimes it's actually quite surprising to me, and encouraging in a way. Somebody who's not responsive, I may play, and they may have some facial expressions that show that they're receiving it. So we are communicating in a way that would be beyond words. But I know that even if they're not responding, their bodies are still taking in that music in some way. And we know this medically, and that's how ultrasound works. It's sound waves creating an image inside, or making an image possible. So yeah, it's really quite amazing and awe-inspiring in some ways, and stepping into the mystery. I think there's a part of what we do in spiritual care that's constantly walking the line of the mystery of what is happening for this other person that I'm not going to be able to know or understand, because they may or may not be able to express it. And how do I support them in a way that's best for them in that mystery, not knowing. And so there's a trusting kind of faith that we walk into. I'll say that I've had enough experiences where people have let me know later, sometimes quite a bit later, and it's, albeit some other event, totally unrelated. And someone will come up to me and say, "You may not remember, but you played for me when I was in the hospital." Or I heard you playing when you were in the hospital, and it was XYZ, often if they're commenting to me, it was helpful. Or you played for my mother when she was dying, or you played for, so we don't always know the impact that we have, and all we can do is send out our best intention. I see that Tim has his hand up, so please, Tim.
Thanks. Likewise, thank you. And I'm always amazed by you and what you do here in the hospital. And I get to hear some of those comments about appreciating. I have a question regarding accommodation. So in my role as a chaplain, one of the things that I've learned to do to take my own bias out is, something that I offer everyone. No is okay. Would you like me to say a word of prayer with you? And if they say yes, I will use what I've heard. If they are Pentecostal, I can shift my prayer a little bit to be more in line with a Pentecostal style of prayer. If they're Catholic, I can shift my prayer and accommodate more of the Gloria Patri or the Our Father, Divine Mercy and Grace, things like that. I'm curious musically, the role of accommodation in your work, and how you said you don't have a playlist or a set necessarily, knowing what you're going to play and the differences of trying to accommodate the sights and soundscapes that are present. Well, what are the cues if you are informed this patient is on comfort measures, family is present, this patient is Jewish, this patient is, this family just lost their child. What is the role of accommodation in trying to meet the needs of patients, family, and staff?
Yeah. When I am aware of someone's spiritual tradition, if I'm able, I may try to play music from that spiritual tradition. So I have a little bit of Jewish music. There's a type of music called a nigun, which is often a wordless chant of a sort, and I can play that kind of music on the harp. I have a few pieces of Gregorian chant that I will sometimes play if I'm in the area of somebody who I know is Catholic, or common hymns like Nearer My God to Thee, or In the Garden for somebody of Protestant background. And I have some Buddhist chant if I happen to know there's somebody who's Buddhist. Although I'm also aware that, you know, much as there are different musical traditions in different churches, there are different chant traditions in different Buddhist traditions as well. So my Buddhist chant may not be their Buddhist chant, but the intent can be there. So when I'm aware, I do try to share that if it's appropriate. Or I may touch into it and then go into something unfamiliar, but in a similar style. One of the reasons for using unfamiliar music and improvisation is that then the person who's hearing it can attach to it whatever they want. It can become theirs. I'm offering it as something that they can then pick up and, you know, if there's visualizations that come for them, or memories, or their own prayer internally, that unfamiliar music gives them space to do that. And it may often be quite minimalist. I may just be doing a chord progression that's common to other songs, and someone can imagine their own song with it. So I try to have as light a touch as possible. This gets a little bit more musical geeky in a way, but there are different modes like major and minor that tend to have different emotional impact. And one of them, which is less common in modern Western music, is, well, two actually, the Mixolydian and the Dorian. And I'm not going to try and explain all of that, but you can look them up. Basically, it's a matter of where you start in the major scale, just shifting things. So the intervals between some notes are different. They also have their own emotional impact. The Mixolydian, I really like quite a lot. And it's things like a lot of Celtic songs are in Mixolydian. It's sort of in between major and minor. So it's an in-between place that can hold either. If you know the Christmas carol, Christ Child's Lullaby, that's a Mixolydian tune. And the other one is the Dorian mode, which Scarborough Fair is in Dorian mode. What Wondrous Child is, what Wondrous Love Is This is in Dorian mode. And that tends to be a very grounded mode of music that can offer stability and offer hope. And I will often play music in those modes for people who are in recovery. I'll often start in those with those kinds of songs for people in psychiatric care, you know, behavioral service units, or where I think someone needs a little courage. I'll play things like Scarborough Fair, like What Wondrous Love Is This, and other songs that are in that very grounded mode. The other thing is time signatures. Am I playing it in 3/4 or waltz time, which is a more rocking kind of music, and I will often play that for children and babies or people who need soothing. or something that's in 4/4, more marchy, can be more uplifting and engaging. So choosing the time signature also, and whether I'm playing slower or faster, and I can adjust those things as needed. I may see that I've moved into playing something fast. This person actually needs to slow down, and I will consciously slow down what I'm doing. So again, it's all about noticing and joining the person there. What's most helpful. And sometimes, again, if somebody is able to engage, I'll ask. I say, do you like this? Or someone will say, can you play Amazing Grace? Or can you play that? And I'll say, of course, if I can. Sometimes I say, I don't know that one, but how about this? So yeah, Greg, go ahead.
The idea of joining really strikes me. My wife and I years ago used to entertain at a homeless shelter for men who were 50 years old and older. And we just sing rock songs on guitar, folk songs, whatever. Well, every week, and we did it for 2 years, and every week a gentleman would request King of the Road. Roger, whatever his name is.
Miller, yeah.
That's right. And we'd start singing the song for him and he'd get up and leave. And we're like, where'd he go? And week after week after week, he'd request a song and then he'd get up and leave. And so at the end of a session after this happening several times, we kind of sat down and we're chit-chatting, and I asked him, so I noticed, and he said, well, and his story came out about how he was homeless because he basically was responsible for killing his wife and daughter in a car accident. And he lost his job, he lost his home, and he ended up homeless. And it was this song that was playing on the radio when that happened. And so it was his way of healing. It was cathartic for him to hear that and revisit that moment in his life over and over and over again, even though he had to leave. But just a connection with music and our story and the need for healing was so powerful in that moment to learn that for me. So joining with him, I guess, when you said that you try to join with people where they're at is really beautiful and exactly, I think, what we need to do.
Yeah. And I remember at Arnott, one family asking for Take Me Home Country Roads. I had this will often happen in the nursing facilities. Someone will say, do you know such and such? I need to learn Beautiful Dreamer because there's somebody at St. Joseph's that loves Beautiful Dreamer. And it's a lovely song. I haven't learned it on the harp. But Lean on Me, the sort of rhythm and blues song. Some things will fit on the harp, some not. Sometimes I'll just launch into Stairway to Heaven. It's the right thing for the right moment. So being open to what's possible, what might be. I think we may be running out of time, but I'm up to you, Marianne, whether there's time for another question.
Well, we have
Reflection.
a minute or two. What struck me, so I'm going to jump in. What struck me, I think, in this last even 5 minutes is how what you're doing isn't performing.
Right.
It's so relational. You're creating an intersubjective space. We talk about that a lot in spiritual care, how that's the relational aspect. There's three things going on, really. What's going on in the care receiver, what's happening with the caregiver, and what's happening between them. Three systems at work. And it's the same with your music. But it's almost like there's four now. There's the music, there's you, there's the receiver, and then there's the interaction of those three things.
Right.
Within your own bodies as well.
Yeah. We have a image in Buddhism called the net of Indra, which is basically like a gigantic universal fishnet. And at every intersection where the nets cross, there's a reflecting sphere that reflects all the other spheres. So everything is in complete relationship. It's a mind-boggling image to try and hold it you really can't. But in some ways, the music as spiritual care and spiritual practice is that, because it's myself, the music, the person I'm directing it to, the space in between, and all the other people that I'm not even aware of in that unit who can hear it. So yeah, it's hard to describe because it becomes this geometrically very complex, I guess you could say. And in that way, spiritually very complex and also very simple. We're all just in the same boat together. And what I'm doing is, well, my intention is to not necessarily change something, but to put in something that would help bring comfort and ease for whoever's that. And it's, for me, it relates to what we in Buddhism refer to as the metta prayer, sending out loving kindness in all directions, non-discriminatively, that all may be relieved of suffering. So it's for me a very deeply spiritual practice to send that out, healing myself and with the intent to hopefully help heal others.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's probably a good place to end. Thank you so much for being here and for being willing to offer yourself and your ministry and your service to others in so many places down in the Southern Tier. It's a gift. So thank
you all. Thank you all. And carry
Our-
this out in the world as you are able. You know.
Our next Lunch and Learn happens in what month are we in? We're going to be in November, and it's on the 20th at 11 o'clock. And we're still finalizing the presenter, so we'll have to let you know what that's going to be by email. So keep an eye open for what's coming next. Thanks for being here today, and I hope we see you again.
Thank you. Take care.
Buddy.
Thanks, everyone. Bye all.